Georgie, you there? Are you there?
I'm here.
All right. Good to see you.
How yous doing?
Real good, huh? We had a couple, 2, 3 technical difficulties here. We got all worked out.
It's that technology.
You know, it always tangents, you know. I just want to say one thing before we begin. Pittsburgh versus all you. Let's go. Okay, so what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the latest episode of StillerFanTV. George Kupets is joining me. George lives in wacky left coast, as Chuck Noll would say, Seattle. But for those of you who don't know, Jim O'Malley, gotcha. George is a dear friend of mine. We went to elementary school together. Julia Ward Howe.
Julia Ward Howe.
Come on. Julia Ward Howe Elementary School before he sadly moved away to the Baltimore area.
I'm still in therapy over that, but
and
thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Oh, nice. But Colonel Kupets did get sent to the Quantico base. He served in the Marines, and we thank him for his service. What a great guy he was. God rest his soul. But anyway, to give you just a little bit more background on George, George was a punt pass. I love embarrassing you about all this stuff. George was a punt, pass, and kick champion from back in the day. He also was, for those of you who are from Pittsburgh and you know, like the Whippy old 22 that the Post-Gazette used to have. I don't know if they still have that or what they call it anymore, but it was like the top 22 football players in high school football. Well, George was the equivalent of that in his high school area when he was growing up in Maryland. He played football. George, what high school did you go to?
John Carroll.
John Carroll.
You know, the big difference is they got more fans to the lacrosse games than they did our high school football games down there. So it was a bit of a culture shock, you know.
Such is life. Such is life.
Another therapy session, that's all.
You're racking up the therapy bills. And then George got a full ride to Richmond, where he was the first team punter, and I think you were the backup quarterback. Is that correct?
No, I quarterbacked in high school.
Okay. So you didn't quarterback in college. Okay.
I went to Richmond to punt and kick. Ended up a receiver, actually flanker, right? They used to call it a flanker.
Yep.
A long time ago, but yeah, just bounced around positions, and you know, it was good. It was I was a good scout team player. So
nice. Well, I wanted to big you up there and let people know that you have bona fides per football. Also a former high school coach, and I'm sure he's probably going to coach again before it's all said and done. All right, but we got limited time here, so I wanted to talk about first of all, as far as the Steelers are concerned, this quarterback position battle. As Mike Tomlin said, he wasn't going to give like a daily report card on it, which makes complete sense to me. Clearly, it's the most important position battle. It's the first time that the Steelers have had a quarterback competition in camp since 2004. Now, Trubisky, from what I've read, he had an interview with Peter King and everything I'm reading on the Trib, and Brooke Pryor from ESPN, who's covering the Steelers. Trubisky's been taking all the first team snaps,
right? But
he's had a difficult time getting the offense into the end zone during some goal line drills, but mainly the 7 shots drill, which as you know, and I'll explain for people who don't know, which simulates 2-point conversions. And during those 7-shot drills, he's had 14 straight unsuccessful throws. Now, that's according to Chris Adamski of the Trib. Now, I don't know if that means 14 straight incompletions, or if that means he's had some incompletions and some completions where guys haven't gotten into the end zone to convert the 2 points. But do you think, George, first of all, do you think that means Trubisky is performing poorly, or if the defense is performing really well?
I mean, you know, it always seems that the defense has got the upper hand in the early part of practice, right?
Yep.
Um,
Early
but
part of the
Trubisky's,
season too, really.
what's that?
Early part of the season too, really.
Right. You know, and so you've got a new quarterback, a new line. You've got your top receiver who's holding in, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. I mean, there's all these things one after the other that, you know, those are all check marks in the defensive side, you know, advantages. And you've got some, you know, defensive player of the year over there on the defensive side of the ball. You've got some veteran defensive linemen. You've got, a secondary with safety who was just signed to a long-term contract. You've got a new coach back there, a new DC, but also Brian Flores, former head coach in Miami, who's working with the line. I mean, there's just a lot in favor of the defense there early on. So it's 1 week. It's in shorts. Everybody just, what did Rogers say? Relax. RELAX.
Yeah, and I won't do the true Chuck Noll quote. I'll just paraphrase him that they all look good at practice.
Right. They all look good in their underwear, right?
Yeah.
They...
Okay, so just some quick stats from 3 or 4 practices from last week. Mason Rudolph was 22 of 32, 181 yards, 4 TDs, no picks. Trubisky 16 of 32 for 159 yards, 3 TDs, 3 picks, and Kenny Pickett also was 16 of 32. He was 55 yards passing, a TD, and 2 picks. Do you read in anything into those numbers, George?
No, I mean, Rudolph, I'm glad he's, quote unquote, looks good. But at this point, it's not going to win him the starting job. It might get him a Eaton Park Smiley cookie, But
which, to be fair, are delicious. So,
listen, they're in shorts. You can't hit the quarterback. Okay, they're not blitzing. They're not, they're not in pads. Okay, put the pads on. If he stacks a few games in the preseason with that kind of production, then we got a story, right?
Right.
But we're not even in pads yet, so there's not too much to read into that. So
okay, and I read an article. I think it was Yahoo Sports. Matt Canada was quoted as saying that Trubisky's playing well. He did use the phrase "at times" in 2 different sentences. He said, he's done really well at times. He's gotten us into scoring positions at times. He also went on to say that, and this is an obvious statement, that since Mason Rudolph has been there the last, 3-4 seasons, that he's much more familiar with the offense, with the terminology. So he's comfortable with that. But as you said, there's really not a whole lot to read into it. They're playing against air. I did also read some of the comments, because I know you and I both like to look at some of the comments that the fans put in the sections below the articles. And one guy wrote, I don't know why everybody's so down on Mason all the time. And I'm like, and I was like, I'm having a conversation with this guy. I'm like, well, because we've seen him play. I mean, it just seems to me as though he has 2 left. He's got a really strong arm, and the guy's smart. But it seems like when he gets pressure, he's got 2 left feet, and he's just like, he just chucks it out there.
So he's the classic. Hey, Rudolph's the classic game manager, right? And I hate that term because it's overused, but it's appropriately used for him. He is the classic game manager, which is why he's a backup quarterback and can win you a game if you need it, as long as your defense is playing well, you're running the ball well, and so but speaking of fans, and I love the fans, right? Because they're my people.
This is StillerFanTV.
But the whole thing with Pickett, right? And everybody should just slow their roll on him. Take a deep breath, let him breathe, right? I mean, because if you think about it, like look at the history, right? Look at Dan Fouts, right? He was the quarterback on the all-decade team of the 80s. Okay, Fouts was drafted in 1973. Didn't start till 1979, right? That's
I didn't
incredible.
know 6 seasons. I did not know that.
Right. Look at Bradshaw. Bradshaw's drafted in 1970. In the first Super Bowl season, 1974, he wasn't even the starting quarterback at the beginning of the year. That was Joe Gilliam.
Yep.
Right? Jefferson Street Joe. Kenny Stabler, drafted in 68. He didn't start till 73. So, if you look at history there, these are all Hall of Fame quarterbacks, taken 4, 5, 6 years to start in some cases, in Fout's case. Let's have Pickett marinate on the sidelines for a year and see let's see if Trubisky can be one of those guys too, right? But everybody needs to slow down on Pickett. He's a rookie.
Hey, let me tell you something, George. Stosh from Turtle Creek and Dave from Verona, they don't want to hear that. They want Pickett. Hey, you got to start Pickett. You drafted him #1. He's a quarterback in the future now.
Stosh from Turtle Creek.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I agree with that. And one quick thing, I just want to do my little Al Davis thing here. So you trying to tell me that in 1974, Joe Gilliam was the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then the great Al Davis, he called Chuck Noll and he said, "Hey, why you stop? How come you're not starting Bradshaw? Bradshaw's your guy." And then they win the Super Bowl with him, and here I am, good me. I hand the Pittsburgh Steelers in 1974 Super Bowl on a platter.
Does that mean the Raiders have 4 Super Bowl rings instead of 3?
That means the Oakland Raiders are on the rise, and they will throw the ball deep. All right.
The quarterback must go down, and he must go down hard.
There's a lot of people scratching their head right now. So let's move on to Deontay Johnson. His hold-in. And I mentioned this on my comeback video last week, that it doesn't make sense to me. Like, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, typically if a guy holds out, then he doesn't come to camp. He's working out on his own, whatever it is, because either he wants a new contract or he hasn't signed a new contract, right? So right. Deontay Johnson is under contract, has 1 year remaining. If the Steelers don't sign him, then he would be a UFA, an unrestricted free agent, in March. But he's holding in because he's at St. Vincent. He's at the camp in Latrobe. Yeah. He's on the practice field with pads, but he's like running patterns by himself and watching practice, not participating in team drills. This is just baffling.
In the viewers out there don't have to worry about us giving these, historical references from 3 decades ago on hold-ins, because hold-ins, right? First hold-in I ever saw was last year with Watt, but and that's what makes this a juicy story. You got so much here. You got Deontay Johnson holding in. You've got Watt's hold-in from a year ago. You got Minka's contract that he just signed.
Yeah.
Okay. And you've got the 2 young receivers with Austin and Pickens. And
who by the way, those 2 guys,
yeah, they're
going to be stars.
Right. And that's, we can devote an entire show probably to those 2 guys, right? But Johnson, listen, Johnson's not Watt. Okay. Watt's the defensive player of the year. Johnson's not Minka Fitzpatrick. Minka was traded for. The Steelers traded for him. Okay. He's a very good
draft pick.
Right. He's a very good. Absolutely. He's a very good, but not, in my opinion, great receiver. He's had fantastic production that's gotten better each year. But, I'm even worried about that a little bit because, he's, in my opinion, his skills, he's got, he's good with yak, not because of long speed, but because of his shiftiness. But he's really good because of that shiftiness right off the line of scrimmage, right, within the first 10 to 15 yards, so he can get open. Okay. Well, Ben, the last 2 or 3 years, right, he led the NFL in they've got these next gen stats now, like a time to throw, like TTT is literally a stat.
2 seconds.
Right. 2.22 seconds on average, right? So I think Johnson, because of his ability to get open quickly, benefited from Ben getting rid of the ball. I think you're going to see a dip in production now that Ben's not the quarterback in Johnson. We'll see. But, you know, I think that, I don't know, I think he benefited from Ben being back there, releasing the ball so quickly.
So with that, is you're thinking that with his expected dip in production, let's not break the bank in paying him. I mean, he's not a top. Let's just say it, he's not a top 10 wide receiver.
Listen, there's a trend now for these receivers. There's 4 or 5 of them, right? Signing $20 million contracts. You know, if he's a very good receiver but not great, do the Steelers want to sign him at $20 million per year?
Hell no.
Especially with Claypool and Pickens and Austin, right? I think and that's why this is bizarre to me. Like, if he thinks he's going to get that, I'd be shocked if the Steelers give it to him. So is he going to hold out the whole year?
Yeah,
I mean,
I know your question.
When does it end? Like, when does it end? And it's just strange to me because, you know, and are they talking? Like, are the Steelers telling him, we're not giving you a penny over 15 mil? I mean,
right.
You know,
and even though he's not a part of the wide receiver group, you also got Freiermuth. You got Pat Freiermuth, who is an absolute beast and is going to be great. And so the
cupboard's not bare.
Yeah,
the cupboard is not bare. So, you know what? He's probably going to walk at the end of this year, but I'd rather have that happen than the Steelers pay him $20 million a year. That would be senseless to me. It'd make more sense that they trade him to Dallas, who's now down a receiver because James Washington got hurt, right? Yeah. Trade him to Dallas, see if you can, pressure them into a 2nd-round pick because of their situation or something, or bolster your defensive or offensive line, player for player. But I'd rather see that than them paying him $20 million a year.
Yeah, so. Good point. All right. Speaking of bolstering the offensive line, Kevin Dotson, you and I texted earlier today. We also talked earlier today. You think that there's a battle brewing at right guard, Kevin Dotson versus Kendrick Green. Now, last season, Green, who was a rookie, that Steelers drafted him from Illinois, he was the starter at center. So first of all, let me know your thoughts about the center position. If you think that Kevin Dotson he's going to be a 3rd-year guy from Louisiana, who I really like, and Kendrick Green are going to go at it as competition at right guard, then who's going to start at center for us?
Well, it's not going to be Kendrick Green. It's just, speaking of bizarre, that's a bizarre situation that he gets thrown in there immediately from day one, anointed the starter without having earned it or proved it or whatever you want to say. And now a year later,
Tomlin, players coach.
That's just strange. But a year later, the experiment's over, right? I mean, how could it go from being anointed to the experiment being over?
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's at guard now, and Dotson's at guard, and they're literally, when they do walkthroughs with first team, they've got both of those guys kind of at the guard position, getting the walkthrough reps.
Okay.
And I was watching some of the Steelers live, the training camp live, and don't, just because Green failed at center last year, don't be so down on him. He's got potential, I think, at guard. And the reps that I looked, they were doing these slide drills at line with some fanning motion, and doing some slides. And Green looked significantly more impressive, like athletic and movement wise, in those drills than Dotson did. I mean, it was very noticeable to me. So, we'll have to, put the pads on and see how it is when when it goes live.
But they're running left guard and right guard as opposed to battling it out for one position.
No, they're both trying for, battling out for the right guard position.
Oh, okay. All right. So
yeah, that was just, I think those were just walkthroughs, right? But they had them both, which I've never seen that before, having 2 guys walk through with that, that first team right there. So yeah, there's definitely a competition there at that spot for sure.
They better not try that in a game because they'll get a flag for too many men.
Yeah.
Thank you very
12
much.
12 men on the field. Nice. Very nice.
Okay.
And listen, and if the other team does that and they don't call it, Tomlin should go out there like Cowher did with a copy of the Xerox copy and stuff it in the ref's pocket. Right?
Was that Ben Dreith? He did that too.
Mark Wright or Dreith or yeah.
It was Ben Dreith. He went out there and he couldn't get it in the pocket like the first 3 times he tried. And as he was running away, he finally stuffed it in. It was Bill Carr. He's like, yeah, good job, but he wasn't saying good job to Ben Dreith. So, all right. So Brian Flores, we got about eight minutes or so before we wrap this up, Georgie. So Brian Flores says he's passionate about coaching football. There's been a lot of good communication, linebackers meetings on the practice field. Tomlin says he's a good communicator. I mean, of course, what else are they going to say? But a quote from Miles Jack on Flores, and I'll read this verbatim. I pretty much write down everything he says, even if it doesn't necessarily pertain to what we're learning. He has a perspective on things coming from being a head coach, and it's really made me look at football in a completely different light. He's showing us what the offense is trying. Being a head coach, or I think he means being a former head coach for the Dolphins, he's going to show you a 360 view of what they are trying to do and how we can beat what they are trying to do, what the offense is doing. So, George, first your thoughts on Flores in general, and then we'll move to Devin Bush.
Well, I mean, Flores, by all accounts, he's a good teacher, right? Which, Chuck Noll was a teacher. Way back when, but he's a Bill Belichick disciple, and he's a good teacher. It's going to be interesting to see with Austin being the new defensive coordinator, with Flores coming from a head coaching position to on the defensive staff, and then Tomlin, who we all know has liked calling the defensive plays instead of Keith Butler in the past. Like how's that going to play out? I just hope that they give Flores the room, okay, to have an impact, right? This room and space, on the practice field, in the game planning, okay, and then on the sidelines with calling defensive plays.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting because really it would seem that you've got 3 cooks in the kitchen there, right? You do. You've got a newly promoted defensive coordinator in Austin, and then you've got, as you said, Flores, who is assistant defensive coach with the emphasis on linebackers. And then you have Tomlin, who has a vast amount of experience as defensive coordinators, 1 year at Minnesota. All right.
But you digress. But he's right. 3 cooks. So let's if Flores is the best cook, let's hope they let him cook.
Fair enough. Do you think the Flores is going to get the most out of Devin Bush? I mean, he's got a big job there.
Bush. Listen, you can look it up. There's a clip floating around there on the internet last year. Bush, I think it was an extra point or a field goal, right, where he literally doesn't move. Okay, when the ball's snapped and then kicked. I've never seen that before in the football field at any level. That's scary to me. And granted, the guy had a knee injury, but my question with him is, does he love football? Does Devin Bush love football? He grew up with a dad who was in the NFL, probably had expectations from the time he came out of the womb that he was going to be a player. Mm-hmm. And what if he's never loved it? If he doesn't love it, you get to the NFL and you need to have everything, all your entire motor working, right? And then you have a knee injury, you have to come back from that. Guy doesn't love football. We may be looking at a bust.
God, I hope not. They gave up a lot to get him. They gave up quite a bit to move up in the draft and get Devin Bush. So
they did.
I was very disappointed in his performance last year.
Who's not a quarterback and is an off-ball linebacker, but that's for another discussion.
Yeah.
Moving up in the draft.
Yeah, I'm willing to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt because I've had a torn ACL, and trying to come back the year after you have that injury and trying to come back and compete in any sport. I don't care if it's football, basketball, wrestling, whatever, soccer. It's tough. But man, there were so many times last season where he just looked clueless and out of place, and it did. And from what I saw, it didn't have anything to do with the physicality of the injury. It's just he just didn't know the defense, which is frightening. Okay, finally, did you have one more point about that?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Finally, Najee Harris. He left practice yesterday, and that was yesterday, meaning Monday, August 1st. He had a foot injury. He didn't practice today, which is August 2nd. That's according to the Trib. And I haven't heard anything about whether it's a serious injury. So first of all, that concerns me, but I hope that they're just holding him out as a precaution, and his foot is fine, weak. But you hate hearing about a running back or wide receiver having a foot injury, because they're running their ass off just about every time they're involved in a play. Okay, Najee is supposedly bigger this season. He's bulked up. George, I know from our text earlier, you're concerned about his quickness, his jump cuts, stuff like that. I'm less concerned about his size. I'm much more concerned about him getting killed due to our crap offensive line and the number of touches he had last year. My God, the mileage they put on him in his rookie year and the hits he took. So
listen, Tomlin likes to run until the wheels fall off, right? So, but listen,
that's why you don't take a running back in the first round of the draft.
Yeah. Well,
anyway, about his bulking up and his beefiness, and you're concerned about that.
And I don't know if it's so much of a concern, because listen, I love Najee, and he did bulk. Take a look at him when you get a chance. He is built like Adonis. He is noticeably bigger. And the only thing I was thinking about, last year, I don't know, it was a story, but it was a really small story. Right last quarter of the season, Harris is talking about he was working on his jump cuts and his need to get in and out of holes quicker with fast twitch type jump cuts. And that was, I think it was, you can probably even find that quote somewhere. Right about that time, it looked to me as though he was getting better at that in the last half of the year. I thought he ran his best at the end of the year last year. He looked quicker. We saw some of those jump cuts. And just with this extra size, what I've seen so far this year, he looks lumbering out there, which, part of that, it's his style, right? He's physical. He's a physical running back. I just don't want him to, to not develop those jump cuts again, because I thought it benefited him toward the end of last year. And, if he gets too heavy, that he loses some quickness and maybe is more focused on being physical and running people over than some of those added skills that he gained last year. That's all I was saying. So.
Fair enough. I think he's going to have to run some people over, because there were a lot of holes last year when he ran. My God. Okay, we're about to run out of time, buddy. So thank you for joining. Let's do this again in either a couple days or early next week, the weekend, whatever, right? Depending on your schedule. But then also when we reconvene, let's make sure that we talk about Boswell's new contract, which I think you and I are on the same page that we like that he signed a new contract. We're just not happy about the numbers. But then also some NFL news within the AFC North. Deshaun Watson got suspended for 6 games. I think a lot of people were expecting it to be more than 6 games. And the NFL has until 9 a.m. Eastern on Thursday. So that's really in 2 days to appeal it. And then the other one being Stephen Ross, the Miami Dolphins owner, is suspended for the first 6 games of the season, whatever the hell that means. He's not allowed to attend 2022 NFL meetings, and the Dolphins have been docked a first-round draft pick next year in April. But we'll get into all that next time. Thanks for joining me,
John.
Yeah.
Don't forget, there are 31 teams in pro football.
And then there are the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right. See you next time, buddy.